Okay, so everybody, I'm going to give it a minute. We have a lot of people already on, but there's a lot of people still kind of signing in. So maybe we'll wait. It's 5 o'clock. Maybe wait till 5:02 and then I'll get started. But I can see all your smiling faces. And so thank you so much for coming. I think this is very important stuff. Can everyone hear me okay? Just put your hand up if you're able to hear. Okay, just making sure it's working. Okay, for those of you who are already on, we've posted a little bit of a list in the chat of just kind of, what the etiquette is for the chat. I'm going to be talking primarily just me for the first period of time. And then during the second half of what we're doing, we're going to open it up to questions. And then we're going to also talk about solutions. And when we move to talking about solutions, I'm going to suggest a couple ideas, but I'm also going to be open to listening to your ideas. And we're recording everything. And then we can decide where we want to go from there. Um, this is a very complex series of issues. There's a lot of different ideas about what might be able to be done. And my primary purpose here in holding this Zoom is that I have been a global strategist for almost 50 years, and I've advised many governments and all kinds of things. And one of the things I've come to learn through my work is that it's easier to take on a problem, especially if the problem is really big, like what we're facing now, if you know how we got here and what all the factors in the problem are, rather than just responding to what's happening today. And so I'm going to be going back and giving some background to make sure that everybody on here knows all the background before we start talking about solutions. And I know a lot of you, and so I know a lot of you know some of the things that I'm going to share, but just be patient and recognize a lot of the people don't know what you might know. And that way we all start out on the same page. So I'll go ahead and get started here. I'm Patrick McCollum. I think everybody here knows me, otherwise you probably wouldn't be on here. But my background has been primarily working as a planetary activist and also working as a peacemaker. What I mean by being a peacemaker is I've done a lot of work to try to help individuals and governments, and in a number of cases, major world leaders make decisions that ultimately lead to helping their country or their community or whatever it is. And I believe that we should all be treated equally and with dignity and respect. So when our government or any agency or something isn't treating us that way, I always feel compelled to get in the middle of it somehow and see what I can do to take it on and make a difference. One of the things that I feel is really good about this particular conversation I want to share with you is that we all have seen the news about all the crazy stuff going on. We all have our different perspectives of what's going on. We talk to each other. My information that I intend to share with you is 99% firsthand information. In other words, I didn't get it from a news source or watching TV or on the internet or something. I actually met with the person or was there or have personally observed it. And then I'm sharing you what I have seen. But I'm also not the be all or the end all or the grand poobah of everything. I'm just a guy trying to share what I've seen and what I've learned with you. And then hopefully, with all of your brilliant minds and a large number of people, we can figure out what the issues are that we can address and how to help address them. So, my primary interest here ultimately at the end is to create strategies that we can all utilize to kind of put our country, the United States, back on what I would call on course, but also to look at all the global issues that are the result of the issues that were taking place here. So most of us are thinking about our own community. In some cases, it's just our own town or our own spiritual group or whatever that we're concerned about. But the reality is that the actions that are being taken here, because I'm connected globally, I have people in Africa, people in South America, people in Europe, and they're all calling me going, what are we going to do? You know, this is happening to me. You guys are doing something over there, and it's affecting me right now and my family and my town. And so I think this is a major global series of issues that we're trying to take on. My ultimate position has always been to try to stay out of political things, at least in the forefront, as much as possible, because most of my work has been trying to bring people from two sides who are in opposition with each other, even in some cases in war with each other, and be able to talk to them on each side and then steer them towards the middle and a resolution of their problems. In this particular case, I'm just unable to be quiet. You know, I think things are too crazy and there's too much on the line for me to just kind of remain in the middle. I'm very worried about our country for those of you who are from the United States. And just so people know, we have people on here who are not from the United States also. So I see a few of you already. So this is more of a global call, and I'm going to be speaking primarily about the US issues, but then I'm going to speak a little later about Ukraine, which affects everybody in Europe and many other countries also. Um, I'd like to start out by saying that I have a particular prejudice against the President of the United States. And so I would like to put that right out front because, you know, I try to work with everybody, but I have reasons for that. And I'd like to start by sharing those reasons because then they will give you some first-hand information about our current president, why I feel the way that I do. Okay. So I want to start off with that many, many years ago, before Trump was president of the United States, way, way, way back, a member of my family was involved in a major deal that Trump was involved in, involving in the $1 billion plus range. And it was related to the purchase of land and things in Atlantic City to create casinos there. So that goes back a long time ago. And Trump and his attorneys came and met with attorneys and people from the other side, and they spent a month negotiating together on a contract which was hundreds of pages of data and information in the contract that they were all agreeing on to do this like $1 billion deal. And then Trump's team, or Trump and them, suggested that everybody ought to take a break before they signed the documents and like go to lunch. And, you know, they've been working on it for a month or two and a lot of money, a lot of stress. And everybody just go kind of relax and then I'll come back later in the day and sign the contract and finalize the deal. Now, this is real. This is not something made up. So people all went out to their different lunches and things. And unbeknownst to Trump and his team, the place where the contract was like a boardroom and it had video camera. And Trump came in and they opened up the documents, took documents out of the actual contract and substituted documents in the middle of a multi-hundred page document and put it all back together so that when they all came back to sign this huge $1 billion deal, people would be signing something that Trump had added additional things to that no one else would have known about. And I don't know about you, but from my perspective, that's pretty serious stuff. And in fact, at the time, it was considered criminal fraud, and he could have gone to prison for like 20 years over it. But it's happened over and over again in Trump's life. He has lots of money and lots of attorneys, and basically the people on the other side were wanting to make the deal go through. They just didn't want to get screwed by the things he added. So they negotiated back and forth, and he ended up giving up some money and some different things for them not, charging him for fraud and putting him in prison, and the contract moved forward. So that's who this guy is. Not, I mean, he's a con man and a fraud in many different ways. And you could look up his history. I was just going through the history of him and his background. He has been the subject of 4,096 court cases so far to date. 4,096 where he did something immoral, illegal, or criminal and was in court. And, I'm old, but when I was young, they used to say, where there's smoke, there's fire. It's like an old saying. And so it's very hard to come back and just go, this is just some poor guy who was misunderstood, who did whatever. And a lot of those cases, just so that I'm clear, weren't necessarily that he was trying to overthrow our government or something like he did try to do. There were smaller things like he hired a contractor to do $200,000 renovation at his Trump Towers, and then he didn't pay the guy. And the guy had to take him to court and to try to get his money. And then he spent $100,000 in attorneys and, carried it out over like 6 years until the contractor just give up because he couldn't afford to keep going to court. And that is Trump's MO. He just goes on, use the court systems, the legal systems to try to overcome anybody who goes against him. So I don't know how many of you have seen the movie The Apprentice, but if you haven't seen the movie, you really need to just go see it if you're someone who cares about these issues and wants to know about Trump. Because the movie talks about his primary mentor, who was a famous con man and an attorney, who taught Trump directly how to respond to all the challenges. And every single thing that he does, including what you see him doing in his office today, all come from those instructions and what he learned. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail about that. I'm going to move on from Trump in just a minute, but do see that movie. It's even on like Netflix and stuff like that, I think. And it'll give you a good background as to, who he is, how he thinks, and how he ended up becoming who he is and doing what he does. All right. So now I want to talk about what's going on in our country. And it goes way back farther than you would expect. So it starts with the Russian creation of malware in 1973. So a lot of people today even don't know that the number one experts in the world in technology, in disinformation and such, is Russia. And they are far ahead of the United States, any of the allies, China, anybody else. They have always been way ahead of any of us in the area of using social media and misinformation and stuff to try to make things happen. So the Russians, originally there was what was called the bot that was invented back in the 70s and didn't really do anything. It was just kind of a fun thing that people played with who played with various kinds of computer stuff. But the Russians reorganized the bot and created an information gathering bot that could go into social media and go to your account or my account or anybody's account that's on the internet and start collecting information about you. And it could do that at lightning speed and for millions and millions of people. So they meaning the Russian government, created what was considered to be the data mining warehouses, or it was also considered to be kind of a state-sponsored Russian warehouse for collecting information to be utilized in different ways in the future. So the Russian government hired hundreds and in the end thousands of engineers, social media experts, computer experts, programmers who do nothing but sit in giant warehouses and gather all of our information. And not just us here in the United States, but Canada, Europe, everywhere else. But I'm going to focus the United States on this particular information. So they were getting all that information together, and then they invented something very specific that was interesting. They invented malware. So, malware was not just something that could um, gather your information, it was something that could take control of your computer in some way, wherever you were, if you were connected to the internet. And so they came together and they created malware, and the Russian government, who state sponsored this, went in a partnership with the Russian organized crime, who were very big after the Soviet Union broke up. And many of the oligarchs, as we call them, are, heads of Russian criminal organizations. And they decided to partner together to raise money to increase disinformation and things to use for political purposes. So understand they've already been tracking you for a number of years, like where you shop for your groceries, what you like to watch on TV, maybe who you date, who your friends are. I mean, really personal information of all different kinds, assimilating it all together. Then they decided who were good targets for the malware. And if they thought you were somebody they could get money from, they target your computer and lock it and send you a thing that would say, you got to send $100 through this particular system to unlock your computer or you can never use it again. And I don't know how many of you ever had malware. I actually had it, but it even overtook things like our telephone companies and government contractors and all kinds of stuff. So, of course, because we have the Silicon Valley in the United States and a lot of really smart people here, we created ways of blocking malware and, creating protections for systems so it doesn't affect us so much now. But it was estimated that the Russians took in $500 billion from US citizens using malware. That's a lot of money. And they put all that money in, they paid money to the Russian mob, and the rest of the money all went into going into developing deeper this go into the internet, create various kinds of disinformation and things that they could use to manipulate the United States and other countries through the internet. Now, I'm older and I remember before there was an internet. I used to get information watching television or reading a newspaper or something. And you already knew that certain newspapers or TV stations were more prone towards one kind of news or another. But ultimately, you could kind of trust the news generally, that at least the news that they're giving you was real. It might be bent one way or the other, but it was at least real. Okay. Well, when the pandemic, go back before the pandemic hit, the Russians decided to use their disinformation network and everything they collected from all of us to create a warfare situation where they could use the internet for an information warfare, and they would use it to target the United States and a couple other countries, but I'm going to focus on the United States. And if you're from Canada or some other country, you can kind of tie in that it also was happening in your countries. But in the United States, what they did was they tried to affect the election. The very first one was Trump's first election. So some of you might remember there's a big hoopah of the election. Was it manipulated by Russia? They learned that it actually was manipulated by Russia, but then people didn't really feel like it did anything, like it made somebody win or lose particularly. At the same time that that election was starting, when Trump was first running for president the first time, he was looking for ways to get rid of Biden, who was he was running against. And so he threw out there into the public that Biden had made a deal with Ukraine so that Biden could make money off of Ukraine. And then what Trump was pushing, that it was illegal against what's called the Logan Act for a president or for any public official to make money as in their government position utilizing another country. So in other words, you can't go to Poland when you're the president, say, hey, you guys want to be protected by the United States, we'll do that, but you got to send, $100 million to my bank account on top of that. And then, I'll make the ruling as president of the United States that will protect you. You're not allowed to do that. It's specifically against the law. So Trump was making a big deal about it and trying to say that Biden had made a deal with the brand new president, who was Zelensky. Well, for those of you who may or may not remember that far back or followed it, in the end, it led to nothing, meaning they never discovered anything about Trump. I mean, not Trump, about Biden doing anything illegal with Ukraine or anything. But there was kind of an issue, and that was that Biden's son was on the board of directors for Burisma Energy in Ukraine. And then people are going, well, wait a minute, he's on this thing and, he's getting paid $250,000 a year to be on this board and he doesn't know crap about energy. So there must be something nefarious in all of that. And ultimately, I'm a smart guy. Nobody ever actually tied that, Biden's son was actually in some you know, hurts with the Ukrainian government or anything like that. But it's pretty simple to understand if you got a country and you're hoping that the United States is going to work with it, and the vice president's son's looking for a job and you got a place you can put him on the board, you're going to do that, which, as long as his son isn't making deals between the United States and Ukraine, there's nothing wrong with that. It is something that shouldn't be happening. And as you know, it did lead into a whole bunch of problems. But ultimately, whether the son or daughter or whatever of a president or a congressperson is working in some other country or has a business in another country, that has happened many times throughout United States history. As long as the person who's working in the other country is not actually a official or a member of the United States government, and they're just a free person doing what they're doing, then there's nothing wrong with it, as long as it doesn't turn around that his son calls Biden and says, hey, Dad, I can give you $100,000 if you do this for Ukraine, which nothing like that ever happened. And I want to bring up a thing that I find very interesting about the Trump administration and position in relationship to the Biden administration. So Trump was making a huge deal about the fact that Biden might be breaking the Logan Act, doing business while he was president of the United States, and getting kudos from the business he was doing outside of the United States and other countries, or even business in our own country, which you're not allowed to do. And Biden, in the end, with all the investigations and everything, they never found out he was doing anything. On the other hand, Trump, when he became president in his first administration, said he would separate from his business, but then he didn't. And he made hundreds of millions of dollars with all kinds of deals in other countries and things like that. And everybody knew it. And he just basically said, up yours, I'm just going to do it. There's nothing you can do to me. I'm the president of the United States. Just to put things in perspective, since Trump was elected for this presidency, he has doubled his wealth. He's now become one of the top 20 wealthiest people in the world. So prior to that, even though he's talking about a big billionaire and all the kind of stuff, it turned out in the end he wasn't even actually a billionaire, he was a multimillionaire. But now he's one of the wealthiest people in the world. All money that he made while he was serving in an official position as the President of the United States. And his son-in-law, who was a member of the United States government, who he sent to Saudi Arabia, made $2 billion. That's public information from going to Saudi Arabia in his official position as a representative for the United States. So it's kind of an interesting thing. On one hand, Trump saying that Biden was a horrible guy because he might have been doing something with Ukraine, which it turned out he didn't actually do. And Biden's son actually did end up making a little bit over $1 million in 5 years from working in Ukraine, that maybe he really wasn't good enough to make that money and somebody was just paying him hoping something would come from it. But on the other hand, Trump made multiple billions of dollars off of deals in other countries, and his son-in-law made $2 billion doing exactly the same thing that he was saying that the prior president should have never been allowed to be a president. So the reason I'm sharing all these things with you is when you get in conversations with people on the other side, they will sit there and tell you, oh, that's not true. This isn't true. No, that didn't happen. This didn't happen. But all these things have happened, and you can go home and you can look on research and you'll find out they're all true. And they just give you talking points and places that you could potentially share with people who might have a different opinion of what they think is going on. And it might be helpful to, at some point later on, to say, things are not exactly the way that they look. So now we have Russia interfering with our election, but unsuccessfully, most people believe, but they really did interfere. And so then they decided to push for a second go at it to see if they couldn't do more to create problems in our country. And this is where the problems we're currently dealing with really come from. Russians got the brilliant idea that in order to be able to become one of the dominant countries in the world, instead of having fallen backward to the United States, was to take actions against the United States that would divide the people in our country from each other, so it would cause chaos and make it so that we couldn't easily vote on things. We would have differences of opinions about things, and we would become almost on the point of civil war. They actually wrote a whole plan out, which is well known and well documented, and then they put the plan in action. So what did they do? They decided that the best place to try to hit the United States was to try to connect through their internet groups and their bots that carried information with nationalist Christians, white supremacy groups, right-wing bloggers, and Christian militias. Those were the primary groups they started to target, because all those groups had different reasons for wanting something in our country to be different. And I could go into all the different points of what all those different people thought, but basically the white supremacists are going, hey, we got all these brown and black people and they're getting all kinds of stuff and we want them all gone. And you got Christian nationalists going, hey, they got Buddhists and Jews and Muslims and all these people. We don't want that. This is a Christian country. And you have the militias who from way back have always worried about the government and go, eventually the government's going to take us all over. So we got to get guns and be prepared. So the Russians went after them specifically to try to bring them in as a group. And when they started doing that through the internet and stuff, they sent physical Russian agents to the United States to try to bring those people together. And those Russian agents created what they call the Patriot Movement. So, what the Patriot Movement is a large group of people, mostly from those groups that I named and some who aren't, who were told that they were seen to be patriots in the United States, to care about their country, and that our country was having bad things happen that other people didn't know about. But because they were patriots, they were going to be given inside information about stuff our government was doing that the rest of us don't know about, and that they were going to be part of a special group because they were such special people with such intellect and such insights and perhaps influence, that they would get information that all the rest of us wouldn't, that would help them prepare for the things that needed to take place in our government. And then the Russians put out this idea that there is a deep state. Now, the concept of there being a deep state in our government and others is an old one. It's not a new thing. But the idea of the deep state originally was that you got a big government full of a bunch of bureaucracy, and they're all doing whatever they're doing, and they're using up a lot of time and a lot of money that isn't really benefiting us. That was the original idea of the deep state, okay, in the minds of people talking about it. But what the Russians did was convince people through the internet and other kinds of targeted information that the deep state was much worse than that. That what the deep state actually was is that the Rothschild family, who were the wealthiest people at that time in the world, had partnered with a number of the other wealthiest people in the world, billionaires and such, and create a coalition who then united with the president of the United States, who then said, we want to take over the United States and make a bunch of money off of people and stuff, and we want to turn all the citizens of the United States into peasants who work for us and make money for us, much like what was happening in the Middle Ages when they had kings and queens and you know counts and countesses and all kinds of aristocracy like that. So they also promoted the idea that our government, the United States, also other governments, was working on a plan to eradicate a lot of US citizens who they felt wouldn't fall into place with this idea. And so they started floating around the idea that they were doing things like, this is the deep state, that, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you the last part of the deep state. So then they supposedly brought the president in on it. The president liked it and is going, he's going to make a bunch of money and stuff. And so he went, and every person in the United States government was a plant who was absolutely dedicated to the president of the United States. And whatever the president told them, they would all do like automatons with their full alliance or allegiance to the president, who had an allegiance to this elite group of billionaires. So that's what they were saying the deep state was, and that the deep state had decided that they need to get rid of a bunch of us. So they were, and they were saying the way they were getting rid of us is that they were putting special chemicals to kill us in the clouds when jets go over, and you see, like, chemtrails you've heard of, and that they were putting poisons in our water, and that they were doing all kinds of horrible things to try to kill us off. That is our own government trying to kill us off. And they kept trying to find ways to break in to get more people on board, but they only had a small group of these kind of crazies on board to start with. But then the pandemic hit. When the pandemic hit, the Russian disinformation and the quote plants or Russian agents leading the Patriot movement started telling people that our own government created the pandemic to kill us. And then those of us that wouldn't die from it were forcing us to take vaccinations, which had poison in them that was designed to kill us to reduce the population to just those of us who would be subservient. So I just want to pause for a second here, take a breath. I'm going to take a drink of my mocha frappuccino if you don't mind. So when I say there was Russian agents trying to draft people, they actually tried to draft me directly. I had agents meet with me and tell me that I had been specially selected to be one of the people to help represent them to save our country. And then here's what they told me. They told me that there was a huge thing that everybody in the movement knew, but nobody else knew. And that was that Trump and Putin had made a deal. This is way back in the pandemic time. And that in the end, they would do all these nefarious things to the people, but they would be what they called the white hats. The saviors of humanity would be Trump and Putin, who would create a new world order where we would all have the freedoms that we should have. And then get this, freedoms like Vladimir Putin is given to his people in Russia, where we'd all be free to speak and do whatever we want. Don't worry about it. Okay. So obviously, I told these Russian agents that I was not interested in being a traitor to the United States. And that's what I saw that as being. And that at the time, I thought it was crazy that they would say that Trump might be partnering with Putin to start a new world order. So now put that in the background during the time, well, the pandemic's going on. And even myself, I was thinking, well, I had met Putin and I knew about Trump, and I just didn't see that it could be a reality that the two of them might be talking and literally trying to create some kind of new order or something where they would work together. Now, I'm going to come back to it, but most of you know that Trump is now talking to Putin and talking about giving up all our European allies and everybody else and talking about doing deals with Putin and stuff. So I'll come back to that later, but you can see how this progression led to something that even I didn't believe was possible. And now I have my own questions about whether that's something that was really in the mix and working or not. And we'll kind of see how that unfolds. At the same time, the people who were trying to promote the deep state idea and the patriot movement did two things. The first thing they needed to do was to be able to fund themselves. So they funded themselves within the patriot movement by creating patriot items for sale on the internet. You could be a patriot and buy your own generator that'll run your house when the world's all going to crap. You can get a camouflage patriot jacket so you can hide when the war is starting. You can buy a bump stock for your semi-automatic weapon that'll make it weapons from the patriot, groups. You can buy special books about survival. You can buy food in cans and stores for the bad times they're going to come. All, if you go on the internet, you'll see sold to patriots and by patriots. When you hear that word patriot, every person who's saying it is a traitor to the United States, ultimately. And many of them are traitors to the United States without even knowing it. And that's the part that we have to make sure we keep in mind. Recording stuff. I actually have friends who bought into this. And even family members for some of us buy into this. So they're not evil people, but they have had 5, 6, 7 years of information sent to them personally that has been tailored to make their thinking be a certain way. And so the majority of the people who are on the other side of what most of us are concerned about actually are to some degree innocent. I mean, we'd like to think of them as being horrible, and we think, what are they, stupid? They can't see what's happening and all this kind of stuff. But the reality is, when you start getting an entire government like Russia that's had an expertise for what 30 years on manipulating people through social media and propaganda, and they've been individually going after each of these people using bots and now AI to capture them, people like you and me, we don't even have a chance to, fight against that, because even myself, I don't know if what I'm looking at or reading is really what it is. And if you want to know how bad it's gotten, like, I don't know if all of you had this experience, but right now, just in the last day or two, I go on the internet and I see somebody who is, quote, say, a champion for the Democratic side. So I'll give you a good one. I saw Elizabeth Warren today. I got an email message thing from her and I clicked on it. It was like a little video. And she says, the United States, a lot of people don't like Trump, but we have some really serious problems. And, I've really been giving thought to it. I think Vladimir Putin has some really good ideas, and that, he has managed to do a good economic running of his country until the war started and all the sanctions. But if the sanctions weren't there, he would be doing really well. And I think maybe we should get together with him more and look more at the Russian model. I think it's a good model. Well, I know Elizabeth Warren is not saying stuff like that, but it was physically her face, her body, her mouth moving, speaking to me on the internet. And so they've got to where they can capture your image and make it to where it isn't really the person you think you're listening to. And then that person is telling you something that's totally untrue. So, one of the issues that we have to try to deal with when we try to take on Trump and what's happening on our country stuff is start thinking about, how do we take on this social media issue where all these people are being, propagandized through social media and they don't know it. And of course, if somebody came to me and said, Patrick, you've just listened to a bunch of propaganda and you don't know what you're talking about, the first thing I'm going to do is become defensive. And I'm going to go, what are you talking about? I'm a smart guy. I know better than to get trapped into some kind of thing of propaganda. But the force that would be against me is so great that even somebody with a lot of intelligence and stuff can be wrapped up in it. So we got to figure out how we deal with that. So that's something that I wanted to talk about. Then they said, the Russians, that is, through social media, and the agents said to the people in the Patriot movement, you can't trust any news sources that you normally watch. This was originally, the only news source you can trust is a new internet service called Telegram, which was started by the Russian government. Okay. And many of you might even be on it, but it is a Russian site. And, the Russians have different ideas of what you should be doing with social media than countries like England or the United States or, other ones like that, until maybe now. Now we got a lot of the tech giants and stuff, partnering with Trump, and who knows where we're going. But I'm just talking back a short time ago, people were getting directed to Telegram. And then Telegram was giving them more propaganda. And I have a couple of good friends I've had some serious talks with about this thing of, getting propaganda and stuff like that. And they say, it's just the deep state. Everything that me, Patrick, is saying is just the deep state has captured me and has me believing that all these things are happening. But the reality is Putin and Russia are good guys. They haven't been doing propaganda, and Trump is a guy that loves his country and he's trying to help us all, and all these different things, and that I'm the bad guy because I'm trapped by the deep state and I'm the one who's stupid. And so it can happen. It can be very personal, the people that you're interacting with. So, um, one of the things, another thing that they did a lot, which you already said, is that the people that they capture, they tell them they're special. And so, lots of people want to feel they have meaning nowadays, especially if you're a little older, been around. So when somebody tells you, we're picking you because we know you're really sharp and you're special, you want to hear that. Not too many people go around telling people that we're great anymore. And so if you're looking for attention, it's a great way to capture somebody. So whenever you hear somebody telling you that you're special and they're going to give you inside information nobody else has ever heard before because you're special, that's very suspect. All right, hold on a second here. So, an interesting thing happened when Russia first started putting together the disinformation after they captured people's information and the very beginnings of the Patriot movement. Fox Entertainment, wasn't Fox News then, was at the low end of the number of people watching their station. So they were not high in the ratings, they were low in the ratings. And, the big ones that are the main broadcasters and stuff were much higher. And Fox got bought out and was taken over and was looking for ways to get more people. And the person who bought Fox and put it all together decided to use or start Fox News, not Fox Entertainment anymore, but Fox News, and to go specifically trying to work with and promote things relating to the Patriot movement and these other movements to try to build their followers and the people watching them. And the reason that I know that is two close friends of my wife and myself both worked for Fox Entertainment. And one was their main big anchor, news anchor, and the other one was their number one or two top reporter. And they were brought into the office and told that they were going to start reporting news that was false. And they both quit. And Fox started getting involved. And to this day, they still, as you see, promote many of the conspiracy theories and other kinds of crazy stuff like that. And they picked up many people amongst the Patriot movement. And a frightening thing is I don't know if it's still the case, but when Trump was president the previous time, he refused to take his daily reports about what was going on in the world. He didn't meet with his Joint Chiefs of Staff. He would not let the CIA or the FBI or anybody tell him what was happening in the world. He got all of his news from Fox News and made the decisions basing what he should do with our country and who he should partner with and what actions he should take based on what he watched on Fox News. And he even publicly said that. And you may have watched that he went on Fox News a bunch of times, and did interviews and things with him. So there was this really messed up thing of now he's sucked into this whole patriot movement. And of course, ultimately, they helped to put him in office, because he ended up with this huge group of people who all believe that there's a deep state, and good people who voted to put him in office maybe didn't like Trump that much. In fact, a lot of people, when he was going to the election, would say things, well, we know he's a serial liar. We know he's kind of going after women and doing inappropriate things. He may have cheated a bunch of people and everything, but he's going after the deep state. And so he's still somebody to vote for because no one else is trying to go after the deep state. And an interesting thing, which is where we are now, is what Trump is creating right now is the deep state that everybody's been saying they were worried existed, which really never did exist. And if you think it existed, try going to like the Department of Motor Vehicles and registering your car, or trying to talk to the IRS, or trying to file a thing with the FBI or anything like that. I mean, the bureaucracy was totally chaotic. They couldn't even make hardly anything happen. They couldn't hardly get their way out of a paper bag. And I don't mean that as a disrespectful way. I just mean the system was nothing where they could possibly all be working together. They could hardly even work within their own offices. Now, there's an aspect that's a horrible thing that's happening in relationship to cutting and slashing all these offices and people from the bureaucracy. The people who are the patriots been convinced that they're cleaning out the deep state. But a lot of people forget where the bureaucracy came from and what its purpose was. So what happened is way back, like in the Depression times, like in 1929, that range like that, the farming communities and ranching communities, which were originally the backbone of our country, started just going under. There were droughts. They, had all kinds of problems with crop failures. And at the same time, big companies started buying up small farms that were going under. And we started with corporate farms and getting rid of the small rancher and the small farmer. And what ended up happening is those small farmers that were there making a living, and mostly in the Bible Belt in the South, didn't have any jobs anymore. They were starving. Their families were living in shanties and trailers and stuff like that. So the United States government started saying, we can create a civil service test that an average person who hasn't gone to college or anything, but has a good, just general sense of, how to do shit. Like running a farm requires brains. People can make jokes about rednecks or whatever, but it requires thinking. It may not be deep education like you learn in a university, but it is good thinking. And they said, you know what? We can create jobs for those people so they don't starve and they don't have anything. So many of the people in the bureaucracy are either those families who were saved from going under because they were given jobs to help do things to make our government run, or immigrants who first come into our country and, don't have lots of opportunities for jobs, but can sign up and take a civil service test and start at the bottom and get a job working for the post office or something and end up being a productive citizen making a living. So, what the people who are taking out the bureaucracy don't realize is they're taking out their own people. They're taking out good people, people who worked hard to get in their positions. Many of those people got in those positions because it saved their families from, going under and destitution. And now those people are all going to be on unemployment, and I don't know what'll happen to them all. So, hang on a second. I want to see where I am because I've made some notes that I want to talk about. So now I want to talk a little bit about Ukraine because we're getting sort of the end of this part of the talk. Ukraine, people have heard many different stories about what it is, why Russia invaded it, all the rest of it. And one of the stories going around that's the most common is Ukraine was part of Russia, and now Russia's just trying to take it back. And, they have a right to do that because it was part of them and such and such. Well, if you study the history of Ukraine, you can go back like, start like 900 years ago. Ukraine, which was still called Ukraine, was taken over and part of the Polish Empire, was taken over part of the Lithuanian Empire. Then it was taken over by the Turkish Empire, and then was taken over by the Russian Empire. And so it has belonged to many different countries. It wasn't originally like Russia since the beginning of time. They took it over. But particularly when Russia decided to create the Soviet Union, Russia invaded and took over roughly 15 countries and made them part of the Soviet Union under Russia. And those countries created a bloc known as the Soviet Union. And for a fair amount of time, they were seen as a strong force. If those of you remember the Cold War and all those kind of things, the Soviet Union was exerting a lot of force. And it also was building a lot of nuclear arsenals and missiles. So were the United States and, Europe, a few other countries, in case there was going to be like an atomic war. Well, what happened with the Soviet Union is it just literally fell apart. Fell apart for two reasons. First of all, economically, it just didn't work. And so the people all thought they were going to be, making money, and it was like communist and everybody was going to be taken care of. And what ended up happening is there ended up being giant oligarchs with all the money, and extremely poor people can't hardly live or make it. And then Russia started exerting force and killing people, imprisoning people, torturing people, doing all kinds of horrible things, as the people in the Soviet Union are going, we don't want to do this anymore. Then they just capture you and send you to Siberia. So when the Soviet Union broke up, it put out publicly who still wants to be part of Russia. And out of 15 countries, only two countries said we'd still like to have an association with you. The other 13 countries said, want to have nothing to do with Russia. We've had you dominate us, torture us, take all our money, rape our women, do everything in the world horrible. And there's no way we're going back with you. And we want to become our own countries. And we want to have a democracy. And we want to join NATO if we can. And we want to create partnerships with the West instead of Russia. So it isn't like there's this story that NATO and the United States and stuff was moving in on the border of Russia. That isn't what happened at all. What happened is all the people who were in the Soviet Union basically said, Russia, stay away from us. We all want to join those guys on the other side and partner with them and try to get into NATO so that you won't go after us. And we want to have countries that operate under a democracy rather than under, what Russia was pushing forward as their particular form of communism. So that brings us to Vladimir Putin coming in. There were several other Russian leaders, and one of the last ones before Putin was really leaning toward, let's get together with the United States and the Western countries. Let's stop trying to invade our neighbors. Let's stop torturing people. Let's give people more freedoms to, buy things and to speak openly and all this. And let's, create a Russia that's in the modern world. But the last president doing that kind of thing ended up running out of office. The next president that came in ended up being an alcoholic and a drunk, and Putin was like a guy under him working with him, and that guy literally left office early, and Putin took his place and then became the president of Russia. And when Putin became the president of Russia, I think he's in his sixth term now of that. Um, he announced that it was his intention to try to reunite the Soviet Union and ultimately recreate the original Russian Empire that was put together by Catherine the Great. Okay, which involved a number of other countries that weren't in the Soviet Union. So that was kind of his goal at that point in time. When the Soviet Union broke up, there was an interesting thing going on with Ukraine, and that was that Ukraine immediately, the same year that the Soviet Union broke up, it declared independence, it created a constitution, it voted in a president, and it decided to become a democratic country. But Ukraine had the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world at that point. And the Cold War had ended, and the United States and the allies of NATO got together with Russia and were going, we got so many atomic weapons that if we shoot them all up, everybody on the earth's going to die. Let's reduce the number of weapons and make treaties to where each of us only have a few, so we don't destroy all humanity if we end up having an atomic war. And everybody agreed to that except Ukraine. So NATO went to Ukraine, and the United States went to Ukraine and said, look, you got all these atomic weapons. We want you to give them up and get rid of them. And Ukraine said, well, Russia's already said that they're going to attack us and try to take us over. And as long as we got these weapons, there's no way they're going to ever attack us or take us over because we can blow the crap out of them. But the United States, in particular, as the leader said, we're the most powerful country in the world. We give you our promise, our absolute promise. If you get rid of your atomic weapons and let them all be dismantled, we and NATO will defend you if Russia ever tries to attack you. So Ukraine finally made a whole deal, got rid of all those atomic weapons, and NATO was supposed to defend Ukraine. And in particular, the United States said we use our full military power and force in the world to defend Ukraine against Russia. So now here we are. Ukraine was invaded by Russia, first in Crimea. And when they invaded Crimea, Vladimir Putin said the reason he was invading Crimea was because Crimea was becoming a hotbed of Nazis. And now you have to understand that during Russia in World War II, the Nazis did horrible stuff, just like they did to the Jews. They did horrible stuff to the Russians. So, out of the entire world, if anything you could say to an average Russian citizen is somebody's a Nazi. So, Putin was telling the Russian people that Crimea was becoming a Nazi part of Ukraine, and he needed to attack it and take it over to clean out the Nazis so that it could then be, a good country again and not be a threat to Russia. And he also made the argument that Crimea was originally part of the Soviet Union and the Russian bloc, and that it had people there that spoke Russian. Many of them spoke Russian and Ukraine both, and that he was going to be the savior of the Russian people who were in Crimea. So he attacked Crimea, and Ukraine reached out to the United States and NATO and said, you guys said you're going to protect us, and we didn't. And Russia annexed Crimea, which was part of Ukraine. So now that brings us to current times. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned that Trump was the one who went to Zelensky when Ukraine first had independence to try to get him to say that Joe Biden was doing a deal with them. That's something also important to remember. So Trump was not happy with Zelensky for not, lying and saying that Biden was doing something. He was putting a lot of pressure on Zelensky. So now it brings us to current times. Russia puts 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine and says they're not going to war with Ukraine. They're just doing a giant practice thing for war in case NATO or somebody else decide to invade them. And they're just doing a military exercise. And then, of course, they ultimately attacked Ukraine. But what did they say they were doing when they attacked Ukraine? They said they were attacking Ukraine because there were a group of Nazis in the Ukrainian capital who were starting to form, and they were worried that those Nazis would spread and take over the Ukrainian government, and so they needed to go in and clean them out. They didn't have anything against Ukraine or the Ukrainian government. It was just the Nazis. And in fact, there were some Nazis in Ukraine, and there were some in Russia, and there were some in England, and some in the United States, and some in Germany. But we're talking about, 400 or 500 Nazis in a giant country, not that they're all from there, and they were not running the government. So Russia invaded Ukraine, saying that their primary objective was to wipe out the Nazis in the government. So what did they do? Their very first shellings and attacks were to destroy apartment complexes, schools, hospitals, and just people's homes, and killing thousands and thousands of ordinary men and women in Ukraine. They didn't even attack the capital or the government. They just started killing all kinds of people. And throughout the war, it took over a year before they even actually turned to attacking military sites or the government. Instead, they just killed all kinds of people, 100,000 people more. So, of course, Ukraine started fighting back, and now we've had this whole war that's been going on a number of years. So, bringing us up to date, Biden and other Congress and everything else was supporting Ukraine and saying, okay, fine, we're not putting boots on the ground at this point, but we're willing to give you billions of dollars, and the European Union's giving you money, and we're all sending weapons so you can fight against Vladimir Putin trying to take over Ukraine. Then Trump comes into office. Now, Trump goes to Zelensky and says, you guys are going to lose this war if we don't help you. Even if the European Union helps you, they don't have enough troops and weapons and stuff to really scare Russia enough to get Russia to stop. We're like the only ones that can really help you. We'll help you if you give us half of all your precious metals and things that we need in order to build computers and cars and all kinds of stuff like that. And if we do that, you will not be allowed to join NATO, even though everyone else in NATO said that Ukraine can join. And we will not fight for you against Russia. But if Russia attacks where we have our mines that we now own half of, we'll defend that. So that's kind of your best deal that you're going to get from us. And that's where things with you are with Ukraine. And I don't know how many of you saw what I published the other day, but I'd like to say little small metaphors. And here's the metaphor for what our president did at that point. You got a woman being raped in a bad part of town, and a man's walking along, he sees it, and he goes to the woman, he says, I'll stop this guy from raping you if you give me $50. And then he says, but if I stop the guy, I won't keep him from raping you. I'll just stop him right now. But the only way I'll keep him from raping you is if you let me rape you. And as long as you keep me satisfied, I'll fight for you. That's our president. And it's really disgusting. Now he had Zelensky come to the White House to discuss the deal, and many of you might have seen the news and how that went. And ultimately, our president on national television and everything was horrible. And how he treated Zelensky was horrible. And the one thing I want to give Zelensky credit for, he may be from a country that's nothing big like the United States and all the rest of it, but he basically said to Trump, I'm a president too, and I'm the head of my country, and I'm not going to sell my country out just because you want to make some deal that's good for you. And so that's kind of where that was left. So, what I want to do now is turn to all of you first to see if you have questions. And then I have some ideas for some potential actions and solutions, but I also want to hear your ideas for actions and solutions. And I want to tell you that I'm already serving to advise for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I'm already helping advise for the Ukrainian-Russian conflict. I'm running the largest project to save the Amazon. I'm saving women from sex trafficking, and I'm fighting for the rights of everybody and all the government institutions and stuff for equality. So I got an awful lot on my plate. So I don't really want to lead a whole movement. I might be able to do it, but I'm 75 years old and I'm doing all this other stuff, which is almost beyond possible. So my hope is that some of you might be interested in taking parts of things, and I'd be happy to help advise or do what I can to help that take place. So Mitzi, I'd like to get to where you could turn it over and see if we have questions. We can start with that. Or if you have questions, and or if you have possible actions that you think we could make, and we'll start making a list of those actions. And then after I've heard some, I'll share some of my thoughts. But I want to hear from you first. And thank you all for coming. Okay, Mitzi?
Thank you. We do have somebody here with a question. Pamela Kelly McAfee, I'm going to unmute you.
Hey.
Go ahead, Pamela.
I am a political organizer doing mostly blue team thing. I know that when you have a C3, you have to stay away from red and blue things. But if I lead virtual phone banks, I train virtual phone banks. If anyone wants to get involved with anything blue team right now, we're calling into Wisconsin to help elect the Supreme Court justice for the Wisconsin State Supreme Court to keep the Supreme Court in the liberal majority. We'll be going into Virginia. I do this stuff all the time for red team, blue team. If you don't want a red team, blue team, I also work a lot with disability issues. I'll be on a call tomorrow, a disability bed-in all day, and we'll be talking about disability rights. Basically what I'm saying is I can lend my experience to train people to do virtual phone banks and virtual organizing. So
Okay, so let's start with this. I want to create, and we'll record this so we can go back. Would you be willing to be, we probably have a number of people who might step forward and want to do something. Would you be one of the people that we could talk to about taking some actual actions then in the area that you're an expert in? Okay, so then we want to make sure we remember that. Okay, Mitzi, who else?
Right. Pamela, feel free to put your contact information in the chat for anyone that might be interested. And then we're going to pass it on to Erica. And everyone, don't be alarmed if we set a timer for 2 minutes. This is just to make sure everyone who has an opportunity, who wants to speak, has an opportunity to do so. So Erica, I'm going to unmute you. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for calling this meeting, Patrick. Certainly information that rings true for me very much. And since 2013, I have been the international media spokesperson for Compassion Games International.
Mm.
And that's why Sandy Hart and I are such good friends. And I have been a civil rights and human rights activist my 60th year this year. So however we can jump in and assist, I am happy to do so because they can't frighten me anymore. They've done enough.
So I'd like to put your name on the list. And when I say I'm putting your name on the list, we're doing two things. We're putting your names and what you do in the chat so people who want to privately contact you, but I also want to get together with you in a different Zoom or call with the people who want to step forward and say, here are some things that could happen, who can take what part, and then we all work together rather than a bunch of individual people all doing 20 different things. So may we add you to the list?
Please do.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Erica. I think we have Kath Mitchell. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Reset the timer.
You need to unmute yourself, Kath. We can't hear you.
Just press the button to say ask to unmute. Hopefully you'll see it. All right, no worries, Kath. I'm gonna come right back to you. We have Gary. I'm gonna unmute you, Gary.
I got it.
Oh, there you are.
Hi, Kath.
Okay. One of the most, I mean, it sounds really, really simplistic, but one of the most important things we can do for each other at this point in time, to everyone, not just the same color, not just the same church, whatever. The most important thing we can do for each other is simply to be kind to each other and to look out for each other and to help each other and get back to the point where we live in real neighborhoods and we're out there for everybody.
I absolutely agree with you. And that's fundamental. I mean, if we're going to get people that are on the other side of what we're doing, we have to become neighbors with them. You know, you can't get your enemy to like come to a barbecue with you. You
I
know. Okay, thank you, Kath.
And then I think we had Gary. I may have lost Gary though. If you still have your hand up and want to speak, Gary. Let's see if I can find you here. If not, I'll just raise your hand again and I'll find you. I'm
Oh,
gonna
I
go.
see him.
Where
And
is he? There you are. Yeah, Gary, go ahead.
Thank you, Mitzi and Patrick, for all you have done and will do. Uh, I might a bit of a nod duck. Patrick, we don't know each other well. We have met in Palenque last year. Just want to make sure the plant takes the opportunity to plant the seed. Patrick, are you familiar with Hehaka Sapa, a great 20th century Lakota holy man named Black Elk?
yes.
If you ever have some time we would like to share, we'll talk about the four ascensions of mankind. I can interpret that for you. There's something in there when he talked about anything is possible. Well, anything is a word, a translation on the sacred dream, which is the achievement of relative peace and harmony. Anything is also everything and all, ALL. So in a prophetic sense, when he talks about with sacred medicine, anything is possible. My work in the last 7 years, traveling in the astral and speaking with the elders and the ancestors and the light beings and all these sort of odd things, it's very clear that yes, we have to do the work because we're physical beings, but our higher selves in the spirit world is a real thing. We are light beings having a physical called human experience. I encourage you to reflect upon that. Yes, we have to do the work, the grassroots, the movements, you've spent a lifetime ready to achieve Phil, same thing, done a lifetime trying to do work. Some things stick, some things don't. We're looking for a high batting average. But sacred medicine, what is sacred medicine? It is spiritual understanding, number one, which empowers spiritual growth and spiritual connection. When I talk about sacred medicine, I just encourage you to keep that in mind. Sacred medicine, spiritual understanding of the oneness of all things, and the fact that life itself is a ceremony, and as hardcore and traumatic as life called war and love and experience may be, the good news is death's an illusion. And everybody may not see it that way yet, but that's the good news is that we are light beings and our souls are infinite fractals and mirrors of each other and these odd, complicated things. But sacred medicine is a real thing. In counseling with the higher selves, it's Heoka, special Lakota medicine people, and certain people of certain cultures have the ability to do more sacred medicine work in the astral to alter even the opinions and the actions of living beings in this world. It gets a little complicated. But if you want to talk about sacred medicine, maybe complementing your physical work, and I would believe you're probably a spiritual fellow as well, what would Ram Dass think? These sort of things. What's his guidance to connect you? We could talk to him one time, but sacred medicine. Let's I just encourage you to keep that prophetic but actual tangible. It's a real thing. There's more spirit talkers being born. There's more people spiritual in connection. And the 21st century requires sacred medicine as part of doing the work to find that balance of the way we live our life with the spiritual connection, because it's going to take both to achieve peace and harmony, which is the sacred dream, relative peace and harmony. Anyways, so thank you for allowing me to interject.
Yeah, so I wanted to actually respond to what you had to say because you also brought up another issue I wanted to share. So first of all, I'm a deeply spiritual person, and I believe that amongst all these actions that we're taking, that spiritual action has to be part of it, because you have to recognize that some of the people that are on the other side actually think what's happening is spiritual. So the people I was meeting with, for example, were telling me that President Trump is the second, I'm sorry, the timer went off, actually telling me that President Trump is the second coming of Christ. So I mean, people are all over the place in these things. But what I wanted to bring up, you brought up something, Gary, that's really important. I meant to share, and that is I'm doing a lot of work with the indigenous peoples in many different nations. And one of the things I discovered is that the Russians actually are putting plants, activists in the indigenous nations trying to affect indigenous people to get on board with ideas in relationship to Putin and such. And so it's something, if you're an indigenous person in those nations, you want to be really careful who's coming to your ceremonies and what's happening. Okay, who's next?
Next we have Dr. Patrick Horn. Just asked you to unmute. Thank you.
Hi, Patrick.
Hey.
Good to see you. You gave a lot of food for thought, and some of you have been in conversations where Patrick and I have both been present in the past, I'm sure. And some of you might know that Patrick and I walk in prophecy together with the indigenous people of different tribes. It's very personal. We don't have to get into all of that. But from the perspective of sacred medicine, my opinion is that storytelling is probably the most powerful medicine. And you mentioned conspiracy theories, and I take an interest in those as a literary genre. How do these work? Why do these kinds of stories work? And there's an intelligent way of approaching the genre. You can regard it as a satire. There's perhaps the more exploitative way where paranoid non sequiturs appeal to a person's feelings of persecution or whatever. I think the opportunity is to change the story. We can't bust the myth, but like improv artists, we can lean into stories and we can turn poison into medicine. And those stories can focus on the values. It's easier to respect our neighbor if we stop finding fault and we try to understand the values behind what's driving them to be attached to these stories. It reveals something, and perhaps that's with more appreciative inquiry, we can find out what really unites us at a much deeper level. And we discover who we are, not who I am, not who you are, but who we are. And we do this by changing the story and offering alternatives to this narrative. I've been accustomed to parliamentary procedures recently. I'll be brief and stop for time.
So I want to say that you shared something that really touches what my experience says works better than anything else. Changing the story that we live in is the only thing that can ever affect all of humanity. So, all these different people are living in these different stories, and we need to create a story that includes everyone, where everybody feels like they're part of the story. And the reason we have all these conflicts is people feel they're not part of the story. They're in their story, you're in your story, he or she's in their story. So I think that one of the things we want to put on the table when we're creating ways of pushing back is creating a new story or stories that can help to push back. Thank you, Patrick. All right, Mitzi.
Next we have Lolly B.
Hello, let me turn my video on. Thank you so much, Bahana. I really appreciate what you shared today. I'm really grateful for seeing you well. I'm based in New Mexico. I go back and forth between here and Connecticut. I was very involved in the No Dapple movement up at Standing Rock with the Lakota people. Now, since I'm based in New Mexico, I work more with the Dene. There's an active resistance movement right now starting off against the uranium hauling going through the Navajo Nation. So if people want to get involved with that, I can connect you to the people. I'm trained as a therapist, so I work in mental health. And so that is something I've been trying to figure out how to combine mental health activism work. So if people want to jump on board with that, one idea I've been talking about with other activists as well is like some kind of training for people that might be newer to taking action, direct resistance and all of that movement. And so perhaps organizing like a how-to, especially teaching from the elders to people of other ages, which is so important. And we're just participating in that right now. So those are some of the things that I'm interested in. I'm also from Colombia as well. And so I have contacts there. That's where Pahan and I met. So yeah, feel free to reach out, put my email in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did. I really learned a lot and I'm excited to meet more of you. Thanks.
Oh, Lolly B, my experience is you're a very sharp woman. I really enjoyed our time together and learned a lot from you. I'm wondering if it would be okay to add you to the list of people to help actually organize and put things together. I'm very familiar with what it took at Standing Rock and all those kind of things. And all the things you talked about, I think are valuable things that we could use on one team. So Mitzi, we just want to make sure she gets on that list. Okay, who's next?
Yeah, thank you, Lolly. Next we have Thibault. Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Hey, that's fine. It's French. It's Thibault. So I go by Thibault usually.
I love it. What a great name.
It's good to see you again, by the way. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm glad actually Lolly just mentioned mental health because I guess that's kind of how I can frame this question. Um, I I take pride in my open-mindedness to talk to anyone and everyone. That's always been the case, I would say, up until last November. So, many years ago, I would engage with people on Facebook and all that, and I've had discussions with actual Nazis, like actual communists, all sorts of stuff. And it was sort of a linear process. There's like a way someone says something, the other person says something, and you sort of move forward that way. And so in the last 10 years, trying to engage with Trump voters, um, for the sake of time, recently someone said something which just summed it up perfectly. I found it's almost like I concluded the scientific experiment trying to talk to them. They are unreachable by reality. That's what some journalist said recently. So I it actually reminds me of one of the Batman movies where they don't Batman's trying to understand the Joker's motives, and Alfred just mentions that there is no motive. It's just chaos. That's the motive. And so there's this, I guess my question is, first of all, how do you even engage with someone that's unreachable by reality? And second of all, my own rage, my own negative emotions, with all that's going on, I usually go by like, what would Superman do, right? Right? How can I be the best person? How can I be the most, evolved in kindness and with most compassion? But right now, it feels like it's almost like, is it time to fight fire with fire? you know, I'm not saying violence necessarily, but I maybe start treating them with disrespect. That's my question. I'm sort of at a loss in terms of how to move forward and how to engage with the other half of our country.
So I would say your question is extremely important because that is the experience I have when I try to talk to people on that side who are really, really stuck in it. And I've met with leaders of Al Qaeda, terrorists, everything you can imagine. And I've actually never run into as much difficulty as just talking to an ordinary person on the street. But I think it's an important thing to add into our plan of how to address this. Would you be willing to add your name to the list to kind of help us with thought about how we might address that? I'd
Yes.
appreciate that because I think that needs to be a component of what we're going to try to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mitzi?
Great. Next we have Diana Paxson. I'm muting you now, so hopefully you can see the unmute. There you go.
There we go.
Okay, so I'm Diana Paxson. I've been a pagan priestess for 40 years, and I publish a number of nonfiction pagan books. I am close to finishing a book called Carrying a Torch for Liberty, which my usual publishers went, oh, it's not her brand. We don't know how to market this. So it's going to be coming out from a local pagan press, hopefully fairly soon. The basic premise that I'm working with is that symbols have power, that the United States culture has a number of symbols which the Trumpists have been trying to corrupt and pervert, but they still hold power. And I had been working on this book for a while, when I encountered the work of Robert Bella, it already had noticed that there were a number of religious elements in American political culture. Robert Bella pointed out that Jean-Jacques Rousseau had the theory that every country should have a civil religion which anyone could practice no matter what their official faith. And this is in fact true. We have a Wheel of the Year with the federal holidays. We have the mighty ancestors. We have goddess figures in Lady Liberty and Columbia and so forth. Symbols have power. I think it's very important for us to try and hang on to them. And an example of what you can do with them, the flag, which a number of people have said we should throw it out and start over. Flags are all over the place. If every time, if many, many people, every time they see an American flag, affirm liberty and justice for all, and visualize an example of that happening. If thousands of people did that, I believe that it would have an impact. What I am, I'm working almost done with the book. I will post to the chat the name of the book and the website where you can look for information about it. But I'm also committing, one of the things I'm making a commitment to do, and I started on President's Day, is to present an online ritual on each of the federal holidays to claim and claim their meaning.
Oh,
Okay.
I love your idea.
Soundtrack. Thank you.
Would you be interested, Diana, in helping us, joining with some others to do some strategy, or would you prefer to just work with what you're doing?
Well, I'm 82 years old and I have limited energy, but
Yeah.
if you can, I think I can be best used in any play at any point. Presentation, I think, is
And you're an
probably
amazing storyteller. So, and we need to change the story. So let's talk
yeah.
about that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, Mitzi.
We have about 5 more people. Oberon Zell, I'll unmute you now.
Well, all right. Like Diana, I also am 82 years old, and I've been totally engaged in this process here. My wife Rhiannon and I last night attended a town hall meeting of something called Indivisible, which is very grassroots and across the board of people who are trying to um, address the current administration issues and stuff of all kinds of people. It's very productive, and both of us ended up volunteering to be on different committees associated with that, which will be doing concrete things such as creating statements and circulating them and taking action and organizing protests and so on. Another group that I'm very involved in, I actually instigated, is Pagan Solidarity. And I've put both of the websites up for both these on the chat room, both the Pagan Solidarity and the Indivisible. And a number of people here that I see are also involved in the Pagan Solidarity. And we are very concerned about the Christian nationalist agenda and the Seven Mountains Mandate and Trump's new faith office and all of these things that are really threatening what these people really want is a theocratic country. They do not believe in a secular country. They do not believe in the separation of church and state, and this has been their agenda all along, throughout the entire 20th century and up till now. They've been working for this, and they don't get mentioned much. I see in all of the discussions and talks. Somehow they get overlooked. We talk a lot about the Project 2025. But I think it's very urgent to pay attention to what the Christian nationalist, dominionist, evangelical, Southern Baptist Convention, all these people. Is we want to eradicate all other religions that are not them. And if you look at the history of Christian religion, it is full of crusades and pogroms and witch burnings and many other attempts to exert their sovereignty over everybody else. And people just don't seem to pay attention to them much. So I don't want to take any more time. I just wanted to put that out there. I do think it's very important for us to be focusing on the news stories, because everything that's going on out there is because there are stories that people believe. All the stuff that Patrick was talking about with his weird stories about the deep state and the crazy conspiracy theories that are being promoted. So yeah, that's enough for me.
Okay, so I want to say that I think the Christian nationalist movement, and I'm, I'm for everybody's religion and believing we should all be able to practice. So I'm not against one and, for another and all that kind of stuff like that. But they in particular are really playing a major role in what's taking place, as you pointed out. And I think they're one of the greatest dangers of the whole thing. And so I think we need to find ways to counter that. And I'd love if, I know you're already in a couple other movements and things like that, but if you want to lend some of your thoughts to helping with what we're going to look at putting together in relationship to this conversation, I'd love to have you in there, Oberon.
Well, keep me in touch with the meetings like this, and we will try to attend as much as possible. But we do have an amazingly full plate. But so do you, and
Yeah.
and recognize that mutual overloading our plates thing that we seem to do, Patrick.
Right. Mitzi.
Great.
Who's next?
Next we have Lola Stardust. I'm gonna unmute you now.
Hi. I am also a pagan priestess, and I see a lot of my fellow pagans here, so it makes me very happy. I recently came across some information that, because you were talking about talking points to how to approach the Trump supporters, and I was reading some information that you have to approach them as if you are talking to a cult member, and you will never win, but you have to, it says, I've got it pulled up here. It says how to deprogram MAGA mentality in conversation, and it's based on an article that I believe David Pakman wrote about brainwashing and what happens to people. I've been trying that because I think the Thibault said earlier about mental health. My mental health is suffering because I'm so angry, and I am not an angry person by nature. But I'm talking about it right now. I'm shaking because I'm very angry and very emotional. And I've tried to talk to them as if I'm talking to a cult member. So do you suggest to continue doing that, almost like just divert the conversation? Or there's a lot of tips. If anyone wants to see the article, I can put the link in. I guess I'm just saying, what do you suggest? How do we talk to these people? Do we talk to them like they're cult members? Do we give up on them? Do we treat them with compassion when they are saying such terrible things in response?
So my answer to that has got several levels and it's also complex. But yes, they are like cult members. I mean, I've spoke, and that is not true across the board to everybody who voted for Trump. In fact, right now, some of the things he's doing is making people who voted for him really second guess, why did I vote for him? So it's not everybody, but yeah, they are indoctrinated in a way that's very cult-like. And so if you have information about how to deprogram somebody while you're having a conversation, I'd love to have that put into the chat so that those of us who are interested could take a look. And I also would say to you that my experience in talking to people like them was the same as when I was talking to Al Qaeda or Hamas. You find something that you have in common that can tie you together so they want to continue a conversation. You don't take them on directly, and you don't embarrass them or challenge them in a particular way. You just try to open a conversation, and that has to take place over a long period of time. But I'm not an expert on, deprogramming people from cults. So we probably have some people on here that might be better suited for that. But yes, I think you should continue doing what you're doing, and please post that particular link. Okay, Mitzi?
Next we have Joanne Jajewski. I'm gonna unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, Patrick. Hi, everyone. My name's Joanne Gajewski. I am a mental health practitioner. I'm finishing up grad school to get my specialty in trauma, PTSD, disaster, and crisis intervention. Currently, I volunteer with at-risk youth, ages 14 to 22. And the way I deal with these situations, I have 3 podcasts currently going. One with Harold, who's also in here, and a couple of others. And the way I choose to address the situation is to lead by example. And any way I can help, because I think our youth really needs help and is struggling right now. If I can help in any way with that, I would love to be part of that. So please count me in. And what I'd like to say to everybody is put out there what you want to see in the world. You can be angry, that's okay. But what you ultimately feel inside is what's going to come around you. And you don't want more anger. You want to put out what you want to see happen. And I think we really need to unite and do that. So if I can help to do that, I am happy to do that. Thank you.
So we'll put you on the list if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And when I'm saying we're going to put you on the list, I actually have some ideas of taking some very specific actions, but I would like, instead of talk to 150 people, talk to 20 people who would like to actively do something, and then we can talk again. Okay, go ahead, Mitzi, next.
Bonnie, I'm gonna unmute you now.
Hi, I'm Bonnie, and I've also been a mental health therapist now for 10 years. So I've seen this unfold for the last 10 years on both sides personally, and it's very interesting. I have to say that people who identify as being patriots, they believe they have the truth, like you were saying, Patrick, and they want the truth. So the only actionable steps I can imagine is we have to create something that will get their attention, because anything on the internet, it won't. The algorithms will just shut them out. So for example, just something as simple as investing in billboards saying, Patriots, you're being lied to. And here's a website, and this website will maybe start conversations. Here are some facts that just can't be challenged. They can try to challenge it, but then we'll be there, you know? So that's an idea. Another idea is to use visuals to help connect our movement to being patriotic too, right? Like we care about our country. So like, for example, can you imagine if all these protesters everywhere were to dress up like the Statue of Liberty? Like how powerful of a message would that send? Just things like that, just, ideas of using visuals to help the movement grow. Thank you.
So Bonnie, I think what you had to say was great information, and I'd love it if you'd be willing to participate some. And I have
Absolutely.
a personal question, and this could be to some of the other people. I deal with an incredible amount of stress in the things I do. I handle wars and all kinds of stuff. Plus, I've been going through a lot of medical stuff that's really significant. And I have insurance, and I've been trying to get a therapist. And 8 therapists I talked to that were through my system, when I said, they say, what do you do? What do you need? They go, it's too stressful even talking to you about what you're doing. We can't take you on as a
Oh my
client.
goodness.
So my question is, would you be interested in talking some maybe?
Absolutely, Patrick.
Okay, we can talk further. Yeah, I just know you,
Absolutely.
so I'm just, been trying to find somebody just to talk to. It's not like I
100%.
have major mental problems or something. I just deal
No,
with
but it's
incredible
stressful. Yeah,
stress.
100%.
Yeah.
I am open.
Okay, good. But what you said is great stuff. And the idea of a billboard and things like that, never thought of that. That's great stuff. And we could raise some money to do some things like that. So yeah. love you on the list.
Thanks.
Okay, Mitzi?
We have about six or seven more people. Vic, I'll unmute you now.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, my friend.
Hello, Patrick.
I love
Hello.
you now. Haven't
I
seen
love you
you in a while.
too.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I see many of you I haven't seen in a while. Most of you know High Priestess, Interfaith Minister, Counselor, work mostly with families and children. Um, there are so many things I want to say. I'm so happy to be part of this process. I want to say something about the deprogramming. Forget that word. It's diffusing. You want to diffuse people. You don't want to deprogram them. Deprogramming is not possible. There's a story that I heard that I want to relay to everybody that's very pertinent here. There was a program on TV that was not a documentary, it was an actual show where it showed a psychiatric situation where a man went into a psychiatrist's office with his son, and the young man had been involved in a shooting in a store where he had been shot. And his they were talking to the psychiatrist, and the young man was talking about going through the process and having been shot and all this. And the counselor said to him, you know, it sounds like you're handling this very well. And the father, you know, said, well, yeah, but it didn't happen. It was fake. And the young man said, and there's the problem. And the father was absolutely convinced that it didn't happen. And he could not accept that this had happened to his son. And there was nothing that was going to change his mind. So the son either had to agree to not talk about it with his father and accept that in order for his father to love him, that he had to just not talk about this terrible thing that had happened to him with his father, or they couldn't have a relationship. And so when you're talking about deprogramming these people, it's not possible. Their minds have gone to a place where they have to find their own truth. But the way they're going to find that truth is not by us deprogramming them, it's by diffusing the differences. And the way you do that is just like a bomber deprograms a bomb. You have to find out where the wires are connected and go in very carefully and pull out a wire that's connected to something that you have in common with them. And there's only one language that we all have in common, and that's love. Now, I know that that is not the thing anybody wants to hear, but the way that you reach a child that's in a dark place is with love. The way you reach an adult in a dark place is with love. The way that you listen to someone who's in crisis, which is what I've been doing every day, 30 hours a day, and they're only 24 hours in one, is with love. Because you cannot listen to so many people in so much pain without it. And these people who are in this dark place with all of this hatred and anger, they're in pain. And it's very difficult when we're in so much pain and being attacked and being made the bad guys to remember that we need to come from a place of love. Now, I don't mean don't be mad, because I'm mad as hell. And it's okay to be mad. But when we're dealing with them, we have to remember that they're not the enemy. There's something inside of them that's been put there, and it's taken root. And yeah, there's something there that it shouldn't be there, but it is. And
Okay.
the
Vic,
only way that we
we
can
don't
take
have
it
enough
away,
time. Yeah, we don't have enough time to go past that, but I got the gist. I think everybody got the gist of what you're saying about that we need to remember about love and the deep part of it. And I think that that is great, great information for us to move forward on.
I just want everybody to know that I'm there and I'll listen. And you can rage all you want to, and I will let you.
Okay, thank you, Vic. Okay, Mitzi?
We have about seven more people. Do we have time for all of them?
Yeah, I think we just carry out till everybody's asked their, I can stay, I just don't want to take other people's time, and the people that need to go, you know, you can go. I know this is a long haul here. Go ahead.
Okay, next is Yanni.
Hi, Patrick.
Good
Great
to
to
see
see you
you.
again.
Yeah.
And a very inspiring group you brought together. Um, just want to play off of actually what Vic was saying about love and what's been kind of thrown out there about a new story. And I'll make this very brief. When I was a teenager, I had an experience with an energy, whatever you want to call it, a Christ type energy, that said to me, I came here only to write. I came here and very few people understood me. And all I came to do was to write a love story. Do you want to join me? And so that's been kind of my North Star. And what I would, like to kind of maybe do or contribute, or just it started with other things people said, is to create like a visioning spiritual group or hub that helps to envision a love story, that everyone can join. Call it whatever you wish. Forget the name I've given it. But to work from that internal plane, and then from that be inspired to write action and how to deal with all these different kinds of people and how to bring them all together and to bring them to that place of love, which is the one uniting element that we all have. And then last comment is, as I deal with people who just, it's love that unites people, no matter where their heads come from, no matter what they think about. And so how can we write that story? How can we live that story? How can we feel that story? How can we project that story? And how can we allow that story to manifest? So I just want to offer support in whatever way I can now.
So can we put you on the list?
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm in total agreement with you. I mean, the one thing I'll tell you is I've actually stopped conflicts that are wars by going to someone who chopped people's arms and legs off and ripped people apart and shot people and all kinds of stuff and got them to actually cry because I accepted them as being a sacred person. So I'm in agreement with you that that needs to be part of what takes place, and so I'd love to have you connected. Hey, Mitzi?
We have Tracy.
Hi, Patrick. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this tonight. It's been great. So I'm Canadian, one of your worried neighbors from the north, and I just want to help in whatever way we can here. There's a lot of us, of course, that are quite concerned with what's happening, and we feel that we have a lot of skin in the game now. I mean, there's even talk amongst friends when we sit around about what happens if they attack Greenland. Like, where do we stand? Like, as a country, we're incredibly confused, and we really want to be a part of trying to stop whatever's happening in your country right now. So just count me in, count us in. There's a good 80% of our country that have absolutely no interest in becoming a 51st state. And we just want to help. So let us know what we can do.
So can we put you on the list, Tracy?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I just want to share that I spent from 13 years old to 19 years old living in Canada half my life. And my first greatest love, who I almost married, was a Canadian. And so I love you guys. And I sure don't want you to be a new state of the United States. And I think it's all crazy. But I do think Canada has a huge amount of skin in the game, as you said. And it would be great to have some connections from there, putting input into how we might address this. So I'd love to have you on board.
Thank you. Be very happy to help however we can. Thank you.
Hey, Mitzi?
Deirdre, go ahead.
So I'm also a pagan and a storyteller, a writer, and a musician. 7 years ago, I was running for the Democrats, I was running a group of people that was making phone calls and going out to knock on doors and talk to people. And we got Tammy Baldwin reelected, and we got the Wisconsin's current Tony Evers as our governor. And I've always been a person with invisible disabilities. I've got asthma and allergies and stuff. And that was just really hard on me. And now I also have long COVID. So my energy level is very unpredictable, and I've been feeling really bad that I have not been able to do that and not been willing to go out and be around a lot of people where I risk getting COVID again, because getting long COVID once is bad enough, thank you. So I just wanted to say I have that background. I ran the Milwaukee whatever you call the office that everybody is going in and out of right at the election time to go knock all the doors. I ran that office. It completely exhausted me. But I do have that background, and I could go to meetings and or Zoom meetings like this and put my brain to work at least and try to understand more of what's going on and share what background I have and what brainstorming I can do. And so you can put me on that list.
Would love to have you on the list. And that's the kind of background that we need the most, is people who've actually done it. You know, I mean, as many of us have qualities to do things, but someone who's actually been on the ground doing things is a great resource. So thank you. Okay, Mitzi?
Debbie.
Hello, can you see me? Can
We
you hear
can.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. I am priestess, shaman, pastor. I have a circle. We all gather to celebrate nature, but everybody is encouraged to honor their own tradition. And so we have a really wide amount. Our mailing list is really large. I run a sanctuary with goats, and we have rituals, and I write children's books and write music. And so I'm really busy, and I'm 67, so I'm pretty young, I guess. But what I wanted to share was what I found that works, because in our circle, not everybody sees things the same way. And yet we can all come together with kindness and love in our sacred space and hear each other. We pass the talking stick. Everybody gets a chance to share. And both of my neighbors are Republicans. And you know what? They have been such great neighbors. They absolutely love me. And we can have peace. And, you know, and what I found is slowly, by being a good human being and loving and kind, that wall that would have separated us if we were, you know, ready to duke it out is no longer there. They love my grandkids. They want to give me a lawnmower so I don't have to do the wheelbarrows so much. They watch me, and we help each other. And then one of the protests that was going on, I'm in Northern California, and I said, well, I'd only go to peaceful demonstrations. I'm really against violence or using name calling or saying anything that's cruel. So, but this group was so wonderful. And when the Trumpers came by and started to yell at them, they just said they loved them. And then they took the time to listen to what they had to say, which is, you know, they didn't agree with, but they listened. And when they were all done, they stopped and shared their side of it. And one of them actually put down their Trump sign and just stood with them. And then another illustration of that is my beautiful daughter is the chief medical officer for San Diego's emergency pre-hospital, and they've been very severely impacted. And it's amazing how much the fire department is very Trump leaning. And she has to be meeting with all the chiefs that are the fire chiefs. And she's she mentioned, you know, she was surprised because this guy just completely got in her face and she's like the boss, you know, about Trump. And she's, you know, she's little like me. I'm 95 pounds, you know, I'm like, don't yell at me. And, but instead she was kind. She listened to him, but she said, instead of using data that could be argued, she used data that she understood. So she used it from being a doctor. So where, like the whole black white issue, he had real issues with the DEI, whatever that equality thing was, because he was white male, and felt he was discriminated against. And Joelle said, came back and, you know, shared that, like, did you know that twice as many black women die in birth as white women? And all of a sudden, you know, like, he was like, wow, I didn't know that. That's really amazing. And they were able to, I don't know, meet in the middle. And I just think if you're yelling at somebody, they're not going to hear you. But if you're kind and you're understanding and you listen to what they have to say instead of just writing it off as if it has no value at all, then they'll be willing to listen to you. But if you can't even, you know,
Debbie?
because they're
Yeah.
fellow Americans.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think what you shared is something we all heard. And yes, I think that treating people with kindness and finding ways to come together where we have common things that we can do is definitely something we can do. So thank you.
Thank you. I've been up since midnight, so I'm like not as clear or coherent, but I'm usually in bed by 5 o'clock. So
Okay. Thank you for coming on. Okay, Mitzi?
Jason.
Hi, thank you. Yeah. Um, I am pagan. I have a wide range of studies in different forms of energy movement. One of the things I specialize in is helping people hold space for when they're dealing with a lot of crap in life. I work with healers, leaders, protectors. I want to make myself available to help other people get the emotional help they need. I have a pretty strong intuition, and I lost my lower leg 3 years ago, and all I did was laugh. I had no trauma. That was because I chose humor instead of tragedy. And I got a couple techniques going and mindsets that people take advantage of when I help them. I help them stay focused, centered, and find a way to maintain space in their power in this terrible time. And I want to work with everyone to help keep them centered so they don't succumb to the fear.
That would be great. We could sure use some of that. So would you be willing to be on the list?
Yes.
Okay,
And this idea terrifies me, which means that I know it's a good idea.
Okay, Mitzi?
Let's see, we have Havala.
Oops.
There you go.
Hi, Brody. Can you see? Okay, hi. I'm driving, so I'm going to keep my face forward looking. But I am really grateful to be here. Hi, Patrick.
Hi.
I apologize. I missed the first part, but I'm getting a gist of why we're sharing. So I will share succinctly just a bit about myself first. I'm pagan. I'm also a fairy seer, and I am in an interracial relationship. We have a family together, and we've been together for many years. And there's a couple of things that I'm really passionate about that I feel can help our current situation. I'm based in Los Angeles in the United States. And so there's two things. One, I've always been all about music being the connector. So I think along with love, music is it's the universal language. And I like to use music in ceremonial spaces to bring people together. My passion is doing that to bring us all together around the well-being of our planet and us all being able to live into a future where we can all actually still be living on this planet. So that's what I'm the most passionate about. And if there's a place for that in this conversation and what you guys have spoken about tonight, then I'm raising my hand for that. I can be emailed at transforminglives, Lives, daily @gmail.com. I'll have Renee add that to the chat after I'm done here. And then the second thing I wanted to say is because I'm in Hollywood, I literally saw Hollywood's Hills on Fire last month. And thankfully it was put out before it got to be a big, terrible thing. But what it taught me in that moment upon reflection and meditation was it's time to transform what's coming out of Hollywood. So really, this is something I've been wanting to do forever, but now it's like clearly the time is to tell a new story from Hollywood or from wherever, but I'm in Hollywood. So for me, from Hollywood, with whomever is available and also interested in telling a new story, because I feel like media is so powerful. It is the way that we can get to a lot of people. And now is the time, right, to tell a new story, a story of love, unity, and the celebration of diversity, and help bring people out of whatever crazy fog they're stuck in. So yeah, that's what I'm all about.
Thank you, Havla. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Okay, Mitzi.
Amber.
Hey, video isn't on, but I work in a Native American museum, have for 17 years, Chinatown Heritage. I have EDS, work with the chronic illness community. I also teach about bugs and spiders, and why that all connects is that I teach a lot of people who are experiencing dipping into a different culture and a different perspective for the first time. And a lot of them, especially when it comes to things like the fact I feed yellow jackets and paper wasps by hand, they are facing phobias. So as much as, yes, love is a part of it, I also want to touch on the aspect of curiosity, that even something that we can relate to when we're used to something and we think it's very, very simple can touch on a trigger. Whereas if you touch on something that's outside of anything interacting, and something like what I'll use is there's 3 eyes on top of a wasp's head, so they have 5 eyeballs. Oh, that's really weird. And it takes it away from trying to force them into the idea of interacting or accepting, and just something unique. And that works just the same for people. The other aspect with the Ehlers-Danlos and having chronic illness is that making sure that people know that it is okay to have limits, and that also extends to some people are not ready to hear any kind of message, and no matter what words you say, they aren't going to listen. They're not at that spot, and that's not on you. That's not a personal failure. You're not that person that is going to be able to change their mind. And that there are still going to be times when those people are so wrapped up in their own fear and hate that they are a potential physical danger, and to take action when is needed, such as calling for law enforcement or defending oneself, and that is still okay. That's not a physical failing. That's not to go out and look for it, of course, but that we can't deny that is going to happen. Especially, I just had the first time a visitor terrified because she was almost attacked in the building, and that's the first time it's happened in 17 years.
Yeah.
Thankfully, a few, but
So Amber, I love the way you were bringing the connections between the work you're doing and what's happening. Would you be interested in helping us?
as much as I can, sure.
Yeah, because I think you're bringing a perspective that nobody else is, and it's very valid. I mean, listening to what you're saying, I can see how it might be able to be utilized. I'm a strategist, so what I like to do is take pieces and put them together to end up with a goal, what you're trying to make happen, and you could fit in there really well. So we could use your help.
Absolutely, be happy to.
Okay, Mitzi?
Alan?
Hi there.
Hey.
Patrick, we meet again. The last time was PSG. We were at side-by-side urinals. That's about all. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to talk with you, but I'm coming to you from the beautiful Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where I'm on the old Geezer plant in Michigan taking free classes, which has been quite wonderful. I'm going to be coming out of retirement. I was a psychotherapist 10 years ago. I almost died, but I had a career working with people with cancer and AIDS, and I did a lot of workshops. I've trained in 6 different types of psychotherapy, so I can talk with people about how to talk to people. I actually made friends with a local character who walks around with an AK-47, and I got rapport with him by talking with him about martial arts, and I think he almost considers me a friend now. So it's possible to make connections with people, and there are a number of different ways of doing that. And it'd be great to chat with folks about some of that and talk. The other 2 things, I'll keep it brief here. Signal. Get the app called Signal. I know a guy named Bruce Schneier. He's the one who looked at Edward Snowden's documents for the newspapers, and he's a worldwide expert on security. Signal is free. You can use it to video call. Everything is scrambled. Not even the NSA can get into it. I have a friend who just retired from there. She was a Soviet expert. I talk with her on Signal. So you could definitely have private conversations there. So that's one of the major things. The other thing is, if you get a chance to get to know the other side, look up a guy named Lakoff, George Lakoff, Lakoff. He's got a lot of videos. He's got some thick books, but some shorter ones. But understanding the stories that they tell through the metaphors and the symbols and everything, like Diane Paxson was saying earlier, it's worthwhile. Also, there's a couple of new therapies and such that I could tell the group about. Learning internal family systems will help you understand what people are coming from in a very simple way. And to help you relax more, look into the wholeness work by Connie Ray Andreas. I'm going to be doing a paper on it, showing how it connects up with Buddhism and Eugene Genlin's experiential focusing and shamanic stuff and things like that. She really made a great breakthrough, and you can use it to go to sleep, to meditate, and to work on the pieces of you that hold your problems. And it looks to be really good and really powerful. The book is called The Wholeness Work. So
definitely would like to have you on board if you want to help. I mean, a number of things you mentioned are things important. I'm on Signal, and Lakoff is somebody I've studied for years. I actually believe that being able to, it's like one of the things he's best known for at one time is like he would say something and then people repeat what he says in their conversation, which reinforces the thing that you're trying to get rid of. So, like, let's say you're trying to say, Trump is bad. So you say, Trump is bad. And somebody responds, no, Trump isn't bad. And well, Trump did this and Trump. And then what does everybody thing that everybody remembers? Trump, because he's constructed the conversation so you repeat certain things, and I find that to be brilliant. So yeah, we'd love to have your help.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I've got a lot that I'm doing, trying to come out of retirement, get my license back, but this is worth doing, and I'd like to help you out.
So I think we've got everybody who had a question or something together. I want to put something out to individuals of some people I'm looking to do something particular. So in addition to all the conversations, and we might get a bunch of people together and figure a good plan, a lot of people want to try to do protests and things like that. That's the most common thing, that people are trying to do to get shown so everybody sees you. But I have an idea around that, and my idea involves having someone or a group of people who investigate and find out the personal addresses, phone numbers, and names of every congressperson and senator who's on the Trump side of things, beyond just their offices and their office information too. because one of the things that's interesting is that, you know, you don't have to protest like in Washington, D.C. You can protest in front of somebody's house. And when you have people who are members of Congress and things like that, they're kind of an open thing. And of course, if you did it once, they'd probably not like that and you'd go away and wouldn't do it again. But it would definitely catch some extra, information or connection than you would if you just did like a big march in Washington, D.C. or something. And then there was one other thing I want to share with you. Let me just think about for a second here. Now I just lost it. So, any other final questions just for this round? Okay, I can't tell you how much I appreciate people listening. I think when you talk to people on the other side of these issues, if you think about some of the things that we just talked about, you come to realize that people who are on the other side of where you might be aren't necessarily horrible people who are trying to destroy stuff and do things like that. They're really caught up in a giant manipulation for the most part. And the forces that have got them there are so big that even you and I couldn't necessarily take them on, even if we knew they were happening to us. And so, you know, you have to always keep that in mind when you're talking to people so that you can try to reach out. I stopped a big thing many, many years ago with Al Qaeda when I was one of the people who facilitated talks between Israel and Palestine at the invitation of the King of Jordan. And so I was in Amman, Jordan, facilitating these talks. And I met with one of the number two people from Al Qaeda. And, you know, people had guns and all kinds of stuff. And the guy goes, "Aren't you afraid?" And I go, "Why should I be afraid?" And he said, "Well, you should be." And I said, "You're my brother and you're sacred. And I believe you have something beautiful to bring to the world. And what I really want to know is what is it that you need? What is it that, you know, you're fighting people and all these things, but what is it and how can I help?" And that guy actually started to cry. And he said, "You know, no one has ever listened to me or, you know, anything like that." And so you can reach people that you think are totally unreachable if you make yourself available, as a number of people have said. And I think that we can target that kind of an idea. But the most important thing is that we have things happening very rapidly that are very difficult to stop. And they're happening so fast that they're going to be over and done with before we even take an action. And we also need to give some thought to how do we kind of stand against that? You know, how do we stand for our brothers and sisters who are getting thrown out of jobs saying that they're trash and crappy people and don't know what they're doing when no one ever even did a study to decide who's good or bad or who's efficient or not or anything like that? You know, just literally toss them all out. And so, those are some issues we still have to deal with. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I wish I had all the solutions. I got some ideas, but I think that right now we've just heard from people, and I really appreciate your coming tonight. Okay? All right. Good night. Thank you, Mitzi, Kathy, Regina.